The flashing lights, the roaring crowds, the Instagram fame, Ryan Garcia was boxing's golden boy, a superstar who seemed untouchable. But behind the highlight reels and millions of followers was a darkness no one saw coming. At just 25, his life spiraled into addiction, scandal, betrayal, and a public breakdown that shocked fans worldwide. Now, after arrests, suspensions, and bitter feuds, Garcia finally breaks his silence. In a raw confession, he reveals the painful truth he never wanted the world to know, and it may change the way we see boxing forever. Ryan Garcia wasn't just a boxer, he was a phenomenon. Born in Victorville, California in 1998, he wasn't raised in luxury or privilege. His parents worked tirelessly to support his ambitions, and by the time Ryan was 7, he was already wearing gloves and stepping into the gym. From the very beginning, he wasn't just fighting opponents in the ring. He was fighting against obscurity, against doubt, against the idea that someone from the desert town of Victorville could rise to international fame. By his teenage years, Garcia had already built a decorated amateur record. His lightning-fast hands, his reflexes, and his sharp left hook made him stand out. But what really separated Ryan Garcia wasn't just his skill, it was his charisma. In an era where boxing struggled to compete with the UFC's rise and the digital age's demand for constant attention, Garcia understood something older fighters never did: that boxing wasn't just about the fight, it was about the brand. He leaned into social media before almost anyone else in the sport. On Instagram and TikTok, clips of him hitting the heavy bag with blinding speed went viral. Teenagers who had never watched a boxing match suddenly knew who King Ryan was. He became a crossover celebrity, admired not only for his talent, but also for his boyish good looks and charisma. He had the kind of appeal boxing promoters dream of, a fighter who could draw in the younger generation. Oscar de la Hoya's Golden Boy Promotions signed him early, and they marketed him as the new face of boxing, the heir apparent to the throne of fighters like de la Hoya himself. Ryan wasn't just a prospect, he was billed as a savior for a sport desperate for mainstream relevance. His early pro fights showcased his lightning speed, his knockout power, and his confidence. Fans saw a rising star, the media saw a future champion, and promoters saw dollar signs. But as with so many meteoric rises behind the cameras, there were cracks forming. The pressure was relentless. Every fight was a must-win. Every performance had to be spectacular, and every word was dissected by millions of followers online. Ryan Garcia was no longer just fighting opponents. He was fighting expectations that grew heavier with every post, every interview, every headline. And while the world saw a smiling golden boy, Ryan was already beginning to wrestle with a darker reality, one that would eventually unravel everything. On the outside, Ryan Garcia was the definition of success, undefeated, adored by millions, a celebrity in the making. But inside, he was breaking. While the cameras captured his victories, they never showed the nights of panic, the spirals of depression, or the moments where he considered walking away from it all. By 2021, the pressure had reached its peak. Garcia had just defeated Luke Campbell in a breakout performance, a fight where he was dropped early but rallied back to knock Campbell out with a crushing body shot. It was the kind of moment that defined future champions, and fans assumed it was only the beginning. But behind the celebrations, Ryan's life was unraveling. He began to speak publicly about his struggles with anxiety and depression, something almost unheard of in the hyper-masculine world of boxing. In April of that year, he withdrew from a scheduled fight against Javier Fortuna, citing the need to prioritize his mental health. For many, it was shocking. For others, it was seen as weakness. Social media erupted, some fans supportive, others calling him soft, unfit, or even a fraud. But the truth was darker than most realized. Ryan admitted to panic attacks so severe that he couldn't breathe. He confessed to sleepless nights, to a fear that went beyond the ring. At the same time, rumors swirled of substance abuse and unhealthy coping mechanisms. Whether true or exaggerated, the speculation added to the pressure. Every move he made, every absence, every cryptic post on social media became fuel for gossip. In interviews, Ryan hinted that boxing had stopped being joy and had turned into a prison. The spotlight, once intoxicating, became unbearable. He revealed later that he had contemplated suicide, overwhelmed by the weight of expectations, criticism, and his own inner demons. The very sport that had made him a star was also destroying him from the inside. But even in this chaos, the promoters kept pushing, the fans kept demanding, and the machine of boxing kept grinding. Ryan Garcia wasn't allowed to just be a young man struggling with mental health. He had to remain King Ryan, the smiling golden boy, the savior of boxing. And that duality, the mask he wore for the world and the pain he carried in private, would tear at him until something had to give. As Ryan's battles with mental health spilled into the public eye, another war was brewing. One fought not with gloves, but with words, contracts, and betrayal. For years, Ryan had been tied to Golden Boy promotions under the watchful eye of Oscar de la Hoya, but the relationship was volatile, and tensions between fighter and promoter grew more public with every passing year. Garcia felt he wasn't being given the fights he deserved. He accused Golden Boy of holding him back, of protecting their other fighters, of failing to believe in his ability to become boxing's biggest star. On social media, he lashed out at De La Hoya, sometimes in cryptic posts, sometimes directly. De La Hoya, in turn, fired back in interviews, questioning Garcia's commitment, his maturity, and even his stability. The feud escalated during the lead-up and aftermath of Garcia's super fight against Gervonta "Tank" Davis. For years, Ryan had called for the fight, saying it was the matchup fans wanted. And when it finally happened in April 2023, it became one of the most hyped boxing events in recent memory. But the fight ended in heartbreak. Tank Davis knocked Garcia out with a brutal body shot in the 7th round. For Garcia, it was more than just a loss. It was a public humiliation. After the fight, Garcia accused his own team of betrayal. He claimed people within his camp didn't believe in him, that he wasn't properly supported, and that there were forces behind the scenes that wanted him to fail. He began to hint at deeper corruption within boxing, alluding to backroom deals, mismatched contracts, and power struggles that fans never see. At the same time, his social media presence grew more erratic. Posts about conspiracies, cryptic religious messages, and feuds with fellow fighters raised alarms. Friends, fans, and even former allies began to wonder if Ryan was spiraling. The Golden Boy image had shattered, and in its place was a young man lashing out against everyone: promoters, rivals, even the sport itself. But Ryan wasn't done yet. In interviews, he promised to reveal everything, to confess the truth that fans had never heard. What he claimed to know about the boxing world and about himself was darker than anyone expected. As Ryan Garcia's career unfolded, the fights inside the ring began to feel secondary to the scandals outside of it. For every highlight, reel left hook he landed, there was a headline about his chaotic personal life. The Golden Boy image that had once propelled him into superstardom was collapsing under the weight of controversy. Social media, once his greatest weapon, became his battlefield. Ryan posted erratic live streams, spoke openly about conspiracies, and made wild accusations that baffled both fans and critics. At times, he would disappear from training, vanish from camps, or pull out of fights, only to resurface online with cryptic messages that fueled endless speculation. Was he injured? Was it mental health? Or was it something darker, a spiral into self-destruction? Rumors of substance abuse and addiction began to swirl. Friends and insiders hinted that Garcia was struggling behind the scenes, turning to unhealthy coping mechanisms to numb the pressures of fame and the pain of expectation. Though never fully confirmed, the whispers added fuel to the narrative that Ryan Garcia's life was unraveling in real time. And then came the arrests. In 2024, Garcia was detained in Los Angeles after an alleged incident that further tarnished his reputation. The details were murky, the facts shifting, but the damage was done. The headlines weren't about his skills in the ring anymore. They were about chaos, scandal, and a star spiraling out of control. For the boxing world, this was déjà vu. How many times had the sport seen young talents crumble under the weight of fame and pressure? But Ryan's case felt different. He wasn't just another fighter losing his way. He was a symbol of boxing's modern age, where social media magnified every triumph and every failure. The scandals didn't just hurt Ryan's reputation, they fractured his fan base. Some stood by him, insisting he was misunderstood, a victim of depression and a corrupt system. Others turned against him, calling him a disgrace, a fraud, someone who had squandered his gifts. But beneath the noise, Ryan himself began to admit that there were truths he had been hiding, secrets he had never wanted to say out loud. And those confessions, when they finally came, painted a picture darker than anyone could have imagined. The breaking point came when Ryan Garcia finally said what he had held inside for years. In interviews, on live streams, and in unguarded moments, he began to reveal the confession that no one, not his promoters, not his fans, not even his rivals, ever expected to hear. He admitted that boxing had broken him, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. The sport that once gave him purpose had become a prison. He confessed that the endless pressure to perform, the betrayals behind the scenes, and the corruption he witnessed had stripped away his love for the fight. Ryan spoke of promoters who manipulated fighters, of contracts designed to trap boxers in careers they could no longer endure, of rankings and fights influenced by politics and money rather than merit. He hinted at darker dealings, suggesting that not everything fans saw inside the ring was as real as it seemed. But the confession went beyond the sport. Ryan revealed the depths of his personal struggles, his battles with addiction, his panic attacks, the nights when he felt completely alone despite millions of fans watching his every move. He admitted to suicidal thoughts, to the weight of being called King Ryan, when inside he felt broken and fragile. It was raw, painful, and shocking. The Golden Boy stripped away his armor and showed the scars the world never saw. And for many, it was a moment of clarity. This wasn't just a fighter breaking down. This was a young man crushed beneath the impossible expectations of fame and the unforgiving brutality of boxing. The confession divided the boxing world. Some praised Ryan for his honesty, calling him brave for speaking out against the sport's dark underbelly and his own demons. Others dismissed him, saying he was making excuses for his losses and erratic behavior. But no matter where you stood, one thing was undeniable: the mask was gone. Ryan Garcia had finally told the truth he never wanted to speak, and the world could never look at him the same way again. After Ryan's confessions, his life entered free fall. The revelations had stripped him bare, but the backlash came swift and brutal. Promoters distanced themselves, unsure whether Ryan was still a marketable star or a liability. Sponsors pulled away, unwilling to be associated with scandal and instability. For a fighter who had once been the face of boxing's future, the collapse was staggering. Inside the sport, his relationships were in ruin. His feud with Oscar de la Hoya grew so toxic that lawsuits and public insults replaced any semblance of a working partnership. De la Hoya accused Garcia of being unstable, unreliable, and impossible to manage. Ryan accused De La Hoya of betrayal, of exploiting him, of caring only about profit. The Golden Boy had turned on the Golden Boy, and there was no going back. Even his peers began to question him. Fighters mocked his erratic social media posts, questioned his commitment, and dismissed his confessions as weakness. For someone who had built his persona on confidence and bravado, the ridicule cut deep. But the harshest consequences weren't external. They were internal. Ryan Garcia's confidence was shattered. His once legendary speed and explosiveness seemed dulled in the ring. Losses piled up, and with them came questions about whether he even belonged at the elite level anymore. Fans who once saw him as a future champion now saw him as a cautionary tale, a fighter who had it all and lost it all. And then there were the physical consequences. Years of training, fighting, and abuse on his body had taken their toll. Injuries mounted, recovery became harder, and the specter of long-term damage loomed over him. In moments of rare honesty, Ryan admitted he worried about his future, about memory loss, about CTE, about whether his choices in the ring would haunt him for decades to come. The collapse was total. From the top of the sport to the depths of scandal and despair, despair, Ryan Garcia had gone from golden boy to tragic figure. And yet, even in the darkest moments, there was still one question hanging over everything. Could Ryan Garcia ever come back? Or had the confession sealed his fate forever? For Ryan Garcia, the aftermath of his confession left him standing at a crossroads. At just 25, with his entire life supposedly ahead of him, he found himself more broken than complete. The ring, once his sanctuary, now felt like a cage. He was no longer celebrated as the young king of boxing, but was seen instead as a symbol of wasted potential, of talent undone by demons both inside and outside the ropes. Outside the ring, Ryan attempted to reinvent himself. He leaned heavily into social media, but instead of the polished highlight reels of his early days, fans were treated to chaotic live streams, late-night rants, and unpredictable behavior. At times, he preached about faith and spirituality, framing his struggles as a battle between good and evil. Other times, he spiraled into conspiracies and erratic posts that left even his loyal fans worried. But beneath the spectacle, Ryan was searching for something deeper: identity. Fighters often struggle when the lights fade and the gloves come off, and Ryan was no exception. The adulation that once fueled him had turned into criticism, and the love of millions of followers had never filled the void he carried within. Fame had not healed him, victory had not saved him, and money had not brought him peace. Meanwhile, his personal relationships suffered. Reports of strained family dynamics, broken friendships, and fractured trust painted a picture of isolation. He had lived his entire youth in the spotlight, but when the spotlight dimmed, he was left alone with questions he didn't know how to answer. Who was Ryan Garcia without boxing? Could he survive without the identity of King Ryan? The harsh truth was that Ryan's life beyond the ring was just as unstable as his career inside of it. And while fans hoped for a redemption arc, Ryan himself seemed trapped in a cycle. A man torn between walking away from the sport forever or chasing a return that could break him even more. Redemption. It was the word that haunted Ryan Garcia's every step after his fall. Boxing, more than any other sport, thrives on redemption arcs. Fighters climb from the depths of defeat and despair to reclaim glory, and fans eat it up. But for Ryan, redemption wasn't just about a comeback in the ring. It was about proving to himself and the world that he wasn't broken beyond repair. His first attempts at a comeback were riddled with uncertainty. Every fight he scheduled was met with doubt. Was his heart still in it? Could he still compete with the elite? Or was he risking his health and reputation for one more payday? The defeats he had suffered left scars, not just physical, but psychological. Every punch he absorbed now carried with it the weight of 1,000 critics. And yet, redemption is never simple. Ryan spoke openly about his faith, leaning into spirituality as both shield and sword. He claimed God had a purpose for him, that his trials were meant to forge him into something greater. But critics accused him of using religion as a crutch, a way to excuse failures and avoid accountability. Fans were divided. Some saw sincerity, others saw delusion. His relationships with promoters and the boxing establishment remained toxic. His feud with Oscar De La Hoya simmered, his ties to Golden Boy promotions in tatters. Without a stable backing, Garcia's career felt like it was constantly teetering on the edge of collapse. Redemption required allies, but Ryan had burned bridges with nearly everyone in the sport. Still, there was one undeniable truth. Ryan Garcia was resilient. For all his chaos, all his spirals, all his confessions, he refused to disappear. Even in his darkest hours, he kept fighting. If not always in the ring, then in the public eye. And in that persistence, fans saw a glimmer of hope. Because redemption, in the end, doesn't always come in the form of victories or titles. Sometimes it comes in survival.